Owning a classic car does something subtle to the way you drive. At first, you think you're just learning how to keep an old machine alive, but somewhere along the way, without any formal training or advanced driving courses, your habits start to change, and oddly enough, they tend to make you a better driver. Even when you're back in something modern and sensible, here are 3 of them. The first habit is listening. Classic cars demand it. A modern car filters everything out for you, the noises, the vibrations, the feedback. But an older machine doesn't bother with subtle hints. A slight change in engine note on an old Alfa, a new vibration through the wheel of an MG, or a gearbox that suddenly feels a little less cooperative in a Porsche from the 90s. These are all conversations, and if you ignore them, the car will escalate the discussion. So you learn to listen, to notice, to anticipate, and that habit sticks. You become the kind of driver who feels what the car is doing instead of just reacting when something goes wrong. The second habit is looking further ahead. Classic brakes are, how shall we put this, optimistic. Whether you're in an early Jaguar, a Triumph with a personality, or anything Italian that prefers enthusiasm over urgency, you very quickly learn that last-second decisions are a terrible idea. You start reading the road earlier, you spot traffic building long before it becomes a problem. You leave space, you plan, not because you're being virtuous, but because it's easier than standing on a brake pedal that was designed in another century. And once you've learned that skill, you never really lose it. Even in a modern car with enormous brakes and a dozen safety systems, you're calmer, smoother, and far less rushed. The third habit is mechanical sympathy. Classic cars reward gentleness. They don't like being rushed when they're cold. They don't appreciate aggressive gear changes, and they absolutely remember if you've been unkind to them. So you adapt, you warm things up properly, you shift more smoothly, you drive with intention rather than impatience. Whether it's a softly sprung French saloon, a slightly grumpy British roadster, or an air-cooled Porsche that prefers things done just so, you learn that respect goes a long way. And here's the interesting part, that mindset transfers. You drive modern cars more smoothly, you waste less energy, you feel less stressed, you arrive more relaxed, even if you didn't arrive any faster. So yes, classic cars leak, rattle, and occasionally test your commitment to the hobby, but in return, they quietly train you to be more attentive, more patient, and more aware behind the wheel. Not bad for something with no driver aids, questionable reliability, and an owner's manual that assumes you already know what you're doing. Sometimes the best driving lessons don't come from technology. They come from old machines that simply ask you to pay attention. If you're thinking about your next car, you've probably been told to be sensible, something efficient, something reliable, something that pairs nicely with a spreadsheet. But there's a quiet, rebellious alternative. One that smells faintly of petrol, makes interesting noises, and occasionally asks for patience instead of blind faith. An old and interesting car. And here are 3 reasons why it might be the best decision you'll ever justify to your friends. Reason 1. Old cars have personality. Modern cars are very good, almost suspiciously good. They start every time, isolate you from the outside world, and politely beep if you look like you're having a thought of your own. An older car doesn't do that. It communicates differently. A classic Alfa will tell you how it's feeling through the steering wheel. An MG might rise up theatrically before it's ready to leave. A classic Rolls-Royce won't just go around a corner, it will discuss it with you first. You don't just drive these cars, you negotiate with them, and somehow that makes every journey more memorable. Reason 2. Old cars make ordinary moments feel special. A trip to the shops in a modern car is an administrative task. In something older, it becomes an event. You park a classic Mini or an old Mercedes, and suddenly strangers want to talk to you. People smile. Someone tells you they had one, just like that in 1988 and regrets selling it every day since. Old cars turn errands into stories. They slow you down just enough to notice where you are, what you're doing, and why you bothered leaving the house in the first place. Reason 3. Old cars teach you useful life skills, patience, listening, improvisation, carrying a small but emotionally significant collection of tools. An old Volkswagen or Alfa doesn't break to punish you. It breaks to teach you humility. It encourages you to understand how things work, or at least to develop a healthy relationship with your local mechanic. More importantly, old cars cure you of the illusion that everything should be instant and perfect. They remind you that progress isn't always about speed. Sometimes it's about connection. Now, are old cars practical? Not always. Are they efficient? Rarely. Will they test your optimism at inconvenient moments? Absolutely, but they give you something modern cars can't, a sense of involvement. A feeling that you're part of the process, not just cargo being moved from one place to another. So if you're choosing your next car, maybe don't ask what's fastest, newest, or most sensible. Ask what will make you smile on a quiet road. What will turn a normal day into a small adventure? What will still be interesting long after the novelty wears off? Because life is already efficient enough. Your car doesn't need to be. There's a quiet bond between people who own classic cars. You can spot it almost instantly. It's not about money or performance figures or even good taste, although we like to pretend it is. It's about shared experiences that make absolutely no sense to anyone else. And there are 3 in particular that only classic car owners truly understand. The first is this: the key turn moment. Modern cars start when you ask them to. Classic cars consider it. There's always a pause, a half second, where the engine thinks about its life choices. You turn the key in an old Alfa Romeo or a Triumph, and you listen, not casually, but with the focus of a bomb disposal expert. Is that a healthy crank? Is that a confident cough? Or is that the sound of today being one of those days? Every start is a small emotional journey, and when it fires into life, you feel a completely unreasonable sense of personal achievement. The second thing only classic car owners understand is the relationship you develop with smells and noises. A faint whiff of fuel in a Jaguar, that's character. A new rattle in an old Porsche, that's a conversation starter. You stop thinking in terms of, is something wrong? And start thinking in terms of, is this noise new, louder, or merely expressive? Your car becomes a living thing with moods, habits, and the occasional tantrum. You don't panic, you diagnose, you negotiate, and sometimes you just turn the radio up and promise to look at it later. And then there's the third thing: strangers. Classic cars turn you into a public service. Petrol stations become social events. Someone will always say, I used to have one of those, even when it's a Renault they very clearly never owned. People will tell you about their uncle's MG, their neighbour's Volvo, or the one that got away in 1987. You'll nod, smile, and listen, because you're part of a rolling museum now, whether you like it or not. What's funny is that none of this feels like a burden once you're in it. The quirks, the conversations, the unpredictability, they are the point. Classic car ownership isn't about perfection, it's about participation. You're involved, present, and occasionally late. And that's why classic car owners understand something most people don't. The car isn't just getting you from A to B, it's giving you stories, moments, and a slightly odd but deeply satisfying way of moving through the world. You don't just own a classic car, you enter into an agreement, and somehow, despite everything, you're always happy you did. Owning a British classic car is a bit like living with a polite housemate who smiles warmly, makes excellent tea, and quietly rearranges your life while you're not looking. You think you're in charge, you're not, and if you listen closely, you'll realize your car is plotting against you, not out of malice, but out of tradition. Let's start with the first plot. Number 1, timing. Your British classic has an impeccable sense of when to misbehave. It will never fail on a random Tuesday when you have nothing planned. No, it waits patiently for the exact moment you're heading to a wedding, a long-awaited drive, or somewhere that requires arriving without the scent of petrol and regret. Triumphs, Bristols, old Jaguars, they all share this gift. They'll idle perfectly for weeks, then suddenly decide that today is the day the starter motor feels emotionally unavailable. And the thing is, it won't be dramatic about it. There'll be no bang, no warning light, just silence, as if to say, I'm terribly sorry, but no. The second plot is more subtle. Number 2, confidence erosion. British classics are masters of psychological warfare. One good drive and you feel invincible. You start thinking, I've sorted it now. You tell friends it's actually quite reliable. This is when the car strikes. A minor rattle appears, then a smell, then a noise that wasn't there yesterday and absolutely is there now. Is it serious? Is it nothing? You don't know. That's the point. A Land Rover will convince you that every vibration is either completely normal or the beginning of the end, and you'll never know which. A classic Mini will make you question whether that pull to the left is new or simply part of its personality. You start doubting yourself. The car remains calm. It has done this before. And finally, the most devious plot of all. Number 3, emotional attachment. This is where British classics really get you. Despite everything, the leaks, the quirks, the way a classic Jaguar can turn fuel into noise with astonishing enthusiasm, you fall for it, you forgive it, you defend it. You start using phrases like, they all do that, and it's just a simple fix even though you've said that 6 times already. At some point, you'll catch yourself patting the dashboard of an old Rover or talking gently to an Austin Healey as if encouragement might help. And oddly enough, sometimes it does, or at least it feels like it does. That's when you realize the plot has succeeded. You're no longer an owner, you're a caretaker, possibly an accomplice. But here's the twist. This isn't really sabotage, it's a relationship. British classics don't want efficiency. They don't want speed or convenience. They want attention. They want patience. They want you to slow down, listen, and accept that perfection was never the goal. So yes, your British classic is plotting against you, against your schedule, your certainty, and your spare cash. But it's also plotting for something quieter and better. Fewer rushed journeys, more stories. And the kind of memories you only get from a car that occasionally refuses to cooperate. And honestly, you wouldn't have it any other way. There are many questionable decisions a person can make in life. Buying a British classic car may sit comfortably somewhere between joining a pyramid scheme and cutting your own hair. And yet, if you talk to anyone who actually owns one, they'll tell you it's one of the most rewarding, character-building, occasionally ridiculous choices they've ever made. So today, I want to give you 5 reasons, proper, life-enhancing reasons, why you might need a British classic car in your life. Reason 1, British classics are charmingly imperfect, just like you. A British classic is not afraid to show its quirks. An old MG, for example, will happily reveal its entire emotional landscape through the dashboard. A flickering gauge here, a warning light that comes on only when it feels unappreciated. A Triumph may enthusiastically leak oil, but only because it doesn't believe in bottling up its feelings. And if you ever meet a Jaguar XJ from the 70s, you'll discover a car with the swagger of a rock star and the electrical stability of one too. But here's the magic, their flaws make them lovable. A British classic car teaches you that perfection is overrated. It's the rough edges, the little unpredictabilities that create stories, and in a world obsessed with flawless surfaces and seamless interfaces, there's something deeply comforting about a machine that is still perfectly functional while being gloriously, unapologetically human. Reason 2, they turn every journey into a small adventure. Modern cars make driving feel like background noise. British classics, on the other hand, treat every trip, even a run to the shops, like you're off to scale Everest. Start the engine of a Land Rover Series 2 and you'll feel like you're about to explore a remote corner of Kenya. Even if you're only going to Lidl, take an old Mini onto a back road and suddenly you understand why every motoring journalist becomes slightly hysterical around them. Drive a classic Bentley and you'll find yourself talking in a deeper voice and developing opinions about fine leather. British classics don't simply move you from A to B. They create a sense of occasion. They invite you into the moment, into the sound, the smell, the tactility of driving. They whisper, slow down, enjoy this, notice things. And if you listen, you realize that driving can be joyful again. Reason 3, owning one is joining an oddly supportive secret society. British classic car ownership comes with a built-in community, one that spans from tiny pub gatherings to enthusiastic online forums where grown adults debate the moral purity of different carburetor setups. Buy a classic Mini and you'll suddenly find middle-aged strangers waving at you in car parks. Own a Rover P6 for 6 minutes and someone will walk up to you and say, "My uncle had one of those. Let me tell you everything about it." Starting in 1974, MG owners appear to be born with a sixth sense. They can smell another MG owner from 500 yards away and will materialize beside you with advice, spare parts, or biscuits. It's a hobby, yes, but also a family. The cheerful, slightly eccentric sort, who show up with tools when your car won't start. You don't just buy the car, you inherit the tribe. Reason 4, you learn patience, resilience, and a questionable kind of optimism. A British classic car will teach you important life skills, not CV skills. Not useful in the corporate world skills, but the real fundamentals. Patience, when something works yesterday but not today. Resourcefulness, when the part you need is out of stock indefinitely. And optimism, when you see a puddle under the car and think, it's probably fine. There's a special kind of self-growth that happens when you try to understand 40-year-old Lucas Electrics, often referred to respectfully as the Prince of Darkness, which should tell you everything you need to know, yet somehow you manage, you adapt, you learn the car's language, you celebrate small victories like a monk achieving enlightenment, and over time you realize the car has made you calmer, more patient, and better at shrugging off life's little inconveniences. Reason 5, British classics have personality, real unapologetic character. This is the biggest reason of all. A British classic car isn't just something you use, it's something you get to know. They have moods, preferences, favourite temperatures, and occasionally strong opinions about weather. An old Austin Healey has the cheeky grin of a mischievous teenager. A Jaguar E-Type has the sultry confidence of someone who knows they look incredible from every angle. A Land Rover Defender has the emotional range of a steel anvil, but a heart of gold. These cars are alive in a way that modern machines simply aren't. And because they have character, they give you character. You become the person who doesn't just drive somewhere, you arrive somewhere, accompanied by the sound of an old engine and a light spray of oil mist. People smile at British classic. They start conversations. They bring nostalgia, joy, curiosity, and a tiny splash of chaos. And let's be honest, the world is better with a bit of chaos in it. So why do you need a British classic car? Not because it's sensible, not because it's practical, but because it adds colour to your life. It slows you down, toughens you up, and makes everyday moments feel cinematic. It gives you stories to tell. It connects you to people you never would have met, and it reminds you, gently, persistently, that life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. A British classic car will frustrate you, enchant you, challenge you, and occasionally leave you stranded. But it will also make you smile in a way almost nothing else can, and if that isn't a good reason to own one, I don't know what is. Classic cars attract many wonderful things: admiration, nostalgia, and unsolicited advice from strangers at petrol stations. They also attract myths, persistent, confident myths, the kind delivered by someone who hasn't owned a classic car since 1987, but feels very strongly about it. So let's gently put a few of these to rest. First myth: classic cars are incredibly unreliable. This one usually comes from someone driving a modern car with 3 warning lights on and a software update pending. The truth is, most classic cars are very honest. A classic Mini, a Triumph, or an old Mercedes will tell you exactly what's wrong, often audibly, sometimes aromatically. Modern cars, by contrast, prefer vague threats and cryptic symbols. Reliability isn't about age, it's about maintenance, sympathy, and occasionally accepting that Italian electrics have personality. Second myth: you have to be rich to own one. Yes, if your idea of a classic car starts with air-cooled Porsche and ends with auction estimate, that might be true, but plenty of classics are wonderfully attainable. An old MG, a Rover, even a slightly scruffy BMW from the 90s can be cheaper to run than a modern finance agreement. The real cost isn't money, it's time, patience, and the willingness to Google things like, why does it only do this when it rains? Third myth: classic cars are terrible to drive. This is usually said by someone who expects a 1970s Alfa Romeo to feel like a new Golf GTI. Classic cars don't isolate you, they involve you. You feel the steering, the road, the decisions you've made in life that led you to this moment. And once you recalibrate, many classics are an absolute joy. There's a reason people still talk about how a Porsche 911 feels, or how delicately a well-sorted MG flows down a country road. Next myth: they're just toys for old men. Yes, there are flat caps, but there are also young owners, artists, engineers, and people who simply like things with character. Classic cars aren't about age, they're about taste, and possibly stubbornness. Anyone who keeps a Lancia running in the modern world is not clinging to the past. They're committing an act of quiet rebellion. Another favourite: classic cars are bad for the environment. This one's more nuanced. Yes, they're not exactly carbon neutral, but most classics do a few thousand miles a year at most. They're repaired, reused, and kept alive rather than scrapped and replaced every 3 years. Sustainability isn't just about what you drive, it's about how often you replace it. A well-loved old Volvo, still going strong, has arguably done its bit. And finally, the biggest myth of all: classic car ownership is stressful. It can be frustrating, yes, but stressful. Only if you fight it. Once you accept that a classic car operates on its own schedule, something shifts. You stop rushing, you listen more, you plan better. In a strange way, these old machines teach you to slow down, and that might be their greatest gift. So maybe classic cars aren't impractical relics after all. Maybe they're reminders that not everything needs to be fast, perfect, or efficient to be worth keeping around.